Oh yeah.
And what I'll do is send this to you afterwards. I mean, it'll be more of a conversation, but I mean, we can send this over to you guys, and you can use that as a backup and just kind of take snippets of it and provide it to people who need it.
Okay. Good.
All right. Well, perfect. So Sam, is it does it make sense to kind of jump right into it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just to give Justin a little background, we're here today because, first off, in Club Director, a number of us saw an article about some things that happened up at Baltusrol and your involvement, and that got us talking about our frequent requests from my board for specific data, and the desire to have as much at our fingertips as possible. And this is following a good conversation that Eugene and I had. I just wanted other people, and among the people who were, the most frequent askers for data, to have a chance to hear what you had to say too.
Perfect.
So if you could take us back through, generally, and with the knowledge of, kind of what our limitations are, tell them what you might be able to provide for us. That's where we'd like to be.
Perfect. Yeah, and that kind of covers a lot of the things that we'll go through here. So and what I'll do is I'll give kind of I've got all the notes from our call last time, so I've got some of the databases that we would need to be able to take some information from.
Great.
So we'll go through kind of a little bit of a database review on that part of it. Sam, it will be just me today. I know the last time that we spoke, it was both myself and Kevin Kopanon. Kevin was unfortunately not able to make it today. The other person that you guys may come in contact with throughout these discussions is Vache Hagopian. He actually kind of oversees the entire MembersFirst database platform, not only from a MembersFirst standpoint, but also from a Jonas Club software standpoint, which is our parent company. So I figured what I would do is at least kind of put some names and contact information in front of you as we go through here. But I told Kevin and Vache that I'll be able to handle it today, and then maybe follow them up with some other information afterwards. We also have a bunch of different data analysts that can help clubs out as they get up and get going, because to be perfectly honest with you, data is not the thing that most clubs have been very strong at. Sam, no offense on your end, I am a former club manager. I'm a former club manager. Kevin, I think from the stories that he told you last time, Kevin went from working at a club to being on a committee to being the president of his club, and then he's a member at a few other ones. So we actually come from this kind of data-driven component where we wanted to make sure that we were able to provide clubs with the data that now their new committee members are now requesting of them, because kind of the good old days are, it's sad to say, but the good old days are gone, where most of the decisions that are made are not only decided based off of experience, but they're also based off of looking at the data that tells a different story. Okay. So, those are a couple people that you may run into along the way during these discussions. But my quick goal for today is really to, Sam, you and Gene, some of this may be a little bit repeat for your end, but I want to be able to go through kind of, company updates, basically, what is MembersFirst and how does that fit into what we do here at MembersFirst? Okay. And then I'll fill you in a little bit about what Sam was mentioning before, Justin, was our pilot club that we did this. It was probably about 3 years ago, I think it was. We set off to do a project that actually was driven from Baltusrol. It was one of their board members that was looking for this type of data, but there really wasn't anything out there. There was a lot of really good reporting tools, but most of the reporting tools that were out there within the industry were really reporting out of one system and one software. Whereas that's great, but that's not really a data warehouse where you can actually pull in information from different avenues. So Baltusrol came to us, and they actually have 5 or 6 different databases that they run their operation with. Everything from what they use for tee times, what they use for web, what they use for their overnight rooms, what they use for their point of sale and accounting software, what they use for lessons. So there's so many different things that they needed to kind of aggregate up into one area, but there was no good place for their boards, committee structures, or managers to be able to get the information in one place from multiple systems. Because let's face it, there's no one-stop solution for everything, but it doesn't mean that you can't get good reporting out of them. So I'll talk to you a little bit about how we went from kind of pilot to implementation. We do have this in less than 10 clubs right now. The reason that we were very slow with our pilot to implementation component was mainly because we needed to handpick the people who were out there, because we did not want to have the ideal candidate for MembersFirst is not the club that has one provider. Because if you have one provider, you should just get all your reporting out of that system. But if you have multiple providers, you're going to need a way to not only get your historical data, but you're going to need to get your current, and then you're going to need to feed in other platforms, which we'll talk about in the past. From what I know, your motivation is exactly what Sam said. Sam read an article. It's kind of brought us to a couple different phone calls, and it sounds like more of the questions that are coming from the committee and board level are more around data-driven pieces. Does that cover kind of a quick overview as to what your motivations are for this call?
Yep. Yes, it does. Thank you, Sean.
All right, perfect. So just a quick agenda to make sure that we kind of. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is John Tompkins. Just to let Justin and Sam know, I'm listening. I've been listening in for the last few minutes, and I'm about to get there.
Okay,
John,
perfect.
thanks.
John, thanks for joining in. I know you're stuck in a little bit of traffic. Just to give you a heads up, both Sam and Gene and Justin wanted me to record this just in case you weren't going to be able to make it. So,
no, I must have heard right. I came in probably right after they told you I was stuck in traffic, because I've heard most of them. Your whole introduction.
So just keep your swearing to a minimum, just in case you're going to send this over to anybody else.
All right.
All right. So in order to keep us on track today, I mean, I figure I set aside an hour. I mean, will we need all of that? Maybe, maybe not. Just to keep us on track, figured what we would do is do a little bit of a company overview. I want to do a little bit of a recap from the last call that both Gene, Sam, and I had, as far as like the databases that we would need to feed into MembersFirst. And then what we'll do is we'll jump into MembersFirst and actually take a look at some of the dashboards and walk through kind of how it was set up. And then, if it's something that you think is beneficial, then what we can do is just kind of plan out, what the next steps are. By no means do I think that you're going to, kind of, say, hey, Sean, let's move forward with this today. I'm sure that there's a whole committee structure and decision-making process that you have there at the club. But ideally, let's just try to figure out what next steps are, if any at all. Okay?
Yep.
Is there anything else you want me to save time to cover today?
I think your presentation from before is exactly what we need.
Perfect.
That's great.
All right, so a little bit of background about the company piece of it. So Jonas Club Software is the parent company. Jonas Club Software, it's a part of the Constellation Software group, which is publicly traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. So it's not like we are in a variety of different verticals. We're in niche verticals for mission critical software that jumps into it. MembersFirst is actually a wholly owned subsidiary of that. And underneath the Jonas Software umbrella, we have 70 different companies. Okay. So we actually run into the same challenges that a lot of clubs do as well. So, reporting across multiple companies is really important on this end, but we've driven that down with a project that has kind of brought us into MembersFirst. So MembersFirst actually started off as kind of a, yes, Baltusrol wanted us to do some work with them, but it was actually something that we've been envisioning doing for a variety of our companies. So the MembersFirst component is a pet project that we started probably about 3 years ago that has actually kind of taken traction with the help and support of some of the other clubs in the industry. And that's led us to kind of develop some data-driven dashboards for clubs that use multiple systems. Okay. Basically what it is, it allows you to not only committee members or board members, but it allows actually management at the club to really get a good 360 view of your club through the data-driven component. However, it's not just pulling information in from the systems you have at the club. We'll talk a little bit about how it will pull information in from, say, Google Analytics to figure out kind of where people are going on your site, It's pulling information in from social media components such as, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We could kind of pull in some different information from platforms outside of what the club is actually using. That way you could get a good view as to what's happening and who to expect at the club. Our vision for Metrics First is not necessarily a reporting tool. It's really an engagement tool. So what we're trying to do is make sure that the data that's driven to these dashboards, we want to make sure that that data is actionable for the management. So that when you're looking at maybe it's point of sale data, you can actually turn that around and make that actionable for the food and beverage team to communicate through a targeted email with the members doing things at the club. And the most important thing about this is that most reporting systems will actually do, they're actually going to report based off of a transaction, right? So something has to happen in order for the club to be able to know that something is happening. However, not all interactions with the club from members are transactional, right? You're not always purchasing something. So what we want to do is make sure that we're looking at these kind of non-transactional engagement items, such as, are you making a reservation, or is it somebody's birthday, or did they just mention you in a social media feed or something like that. So we want to make sure that even if they're not making a transaction at the club, you could still get a good view as to what's happening. And then we turn that into looking at some different KPIs that are configurable by the club to measure out what are your actionable items, right? Justin, if you're the president of the club, and I know that you guys are probably on the committee structure and board structure, but today you're going to be the president of the club, and let's just say that you're expected to have a lunch reservation at the club. Even if you have called to make that reservation, because maybe you're bringing a business client or something like that, it will alert a lot of the people at the club to be able to know, hey, Justin's bringing a guest. He's the club president. Sam, maybe it makes sense for you to swing through the dining room at that point, right? So we want to looking at a lot of those non-transactional items because that messaging comes a little bit ahead of time from, before you actually purchase something. So we want to give the club a heads up as to what's going to happen before the transaction. Okay. So it goes through a little bit of a 360 view of your club. Now, questions back to the group. What are the types of data points that you're trying to, or what are you trying to get out of these data dashboards from a system that, maybe questions that are coming up at the board or committee level? What's the type of information you're trying to capture and use?
I think interaction between golf and dining would be fantastic. I think historical data referencing trends in the dining room or at the pool, things like that.
Okay.
Justin, any thoughts?
I've thought a lot. There's some great reverb here. I thought that I've looked at it from the perspective of sharing data with our membership to give them a stronger sense of ownership to the place, right? Some of it was also just overview, how are we doing, right? Sort of, get an idea of the level of activity at our club. Mm-hmm. We've had, 1,800 rounds of golf in the past 2 weeks. We've served so many meals. We've been busy, but there's openings, and here's maybe a snapshot of where some financial highlights. I saw it more as a member dashboard. Mm-hmm. But I also think internally there is great value for the club to better serve members and their guests when there's greater visibility of who's coming where. Okay. So, and you're right, Sam. We run a few different silos, and that distance between the golf shop and the dining room might as well be a mile sometimes. Right. Rather than 35 steps. So that is an operational need. But I'm also thinking about, and John, maybe this was my take on what kind of prompted a lot of this exploration was sort of member communication as well, in general terms.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my perspective from a data collection standpoint in general, in our conversation surrounding that, has just been when we make decisions, we're making them because we stick our finger up in the air and see which way the wind's blowing a lot of times, rather than making informed decisions about things like when to close, when to open, when do we do our annual cleaning, what is our when we're running well, when the club is running well, bringing in revenue, generating enough money to do what we need to do, just not only to just run the place, but make it bigger, greater, stronger in the long run. What's our optimum number of members? How much activity should each of those members generate as far as dining, golf, tennis? How is our tennis program doing compared to Club X? What do we need to do that other clubs are doing to make sure we get more participation there, which leads to more revenue in the dining? All that kind of stuff that ties together, that we don't have a tool to access it. We can ask Gene to, hey, run some historic numbers over the last 5 years for this, and we just don't have a every day, every week, every month plan of what to run, what to look at, and how it all ties together so the thing runs like a top.
Okay. And from those, a couple of the key points that I kind of took from all of those comments is the one thing that's consistent is a little bit of transparency, right? Kind of what's actually happening at the club. And, whether it's an operational standpoint, some of the examples that we've heard by implementing this is, let's just say the paddle pro is saying, or you've got the committee chair for rackets, maybe saying like, our paddle courts are always booked. I can never book a court. We need to build a new court. Well, maybe it just so happens that the times that they're booking, it is always booked. So, but the utilization report may not say it really doesn't warrant it. Like we're literally at 50% capacity. There's no need to build a different court, but maybe we need to adjust as to what are we doing, or maybe there's not. So taking those decisions, like you said, kind of making decisions based off of the wind direction doesn't necessarily help clubs. Now, the decisions that you're making based off of those pieces may be accurate, but if we can provide the data to support that, it's usually something that clubs will feel better about versus, hey, we're just building a new court to build a new court, right? As an example, having that cross departmental, I think, Sam, that was one of the comments that you had made. The difference, golf and dining, yes, they may be like a mile and a half apart at some points, but that's the exact same thing that Baltusrol came to us with. Baltusrol has, they use MembersFirst for their dining, and then they use Forties for their golf. Now, MembersFirst, we have tee time reservations. We have a tee sheet. However, our tee sheet, like the golf pro at Baltusrol, is super comfortable with a different system. That's okay. Like, I don't need them to buy all of our software. But from the general manager standpoint, or from the board and the committee standpoint, they could never get good reporting to figure out, okay, well, how do we say, how many rounds have we had in the last 2 weeks, and then how many people have actually made a purchase in the dining room, right? So you could start to see two departments side by side using two different systems, and now you actually still get the reporting. So in the old days, you would have to say, hey, Golf Pro, you either need to get rid of that system that you love and convert to something else that you hate in order to get that reporting. So this is a way for you to be able to do that differently. So all of the things that you touched on are a part of the things that I'll show you in when we jump into the software. So that's a great kind of outline for that. So perfect. Just a quick database overview for what you currently have. This is based off of our first call. A couple things that you guys are doing. One, Sam, I know you had described your current website. I know that it may be one of the areas that is lacking a little bit, but from the design, it looks like that is when I say local designer, basically somebody built it versus a company or an agency, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
No, a company. It's definitely a company, but very local, very, I don't know, I would say that it is, how do I say
Limited?
it? I say it's limited. We've just authorized a little bit of a redo by them, which is in our budget for the coming year. And bringing it more in tune with the changes that have been made by WordPress. So it'll be much easier for us to work within. So I think I see improvement there.
Okay. And some of the things on that part of it, there is the tough part is that because if you're building it on kind of an open source platform like WordPress, you're really not going to be able to get any good information out of it versus having stuff that is tied together. But it is good that you are starting that redesign process. Now, the money budgeted for that may be well spent, but eventually you may need to kind of start looking at something that's going to be able to, it's designed probably a little bit more for a member management tool. But from one of the databases, you're going to have kind of the website is usually the core piece that we need to pull some information from. Now, usually throughout the web, usually that's where some of the reservations would come from. But currently right now for dining reservations, Sam and Gene, correct me if I'm wrong, dining reservations are being done manually versus like somebody calls the club, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then event registrations, which I just noticed I got a little bit of a typo there. But event registrations, it sounds like you're currently using kind of a social media platform called Clubster currently right now, correct?
Clubster is an option. Most of the reservations are by telephone, but people can sign up for certain events on Clubster.
Okay. And then for your point of sale and accounting, it looks like you're using TAI, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Your email marketing, it actually doesn't look like you're really using any like email marketing software. It looks like you're probably sending, information, maybe departmental communications are coming. And Outlook really isn't an email marketing solution, right? That's a viewer of your personal hosted email or your business hosted email. But it sounds like you're sending out blast emails via that, which of course is not a good idea. But I think that Sam, you and Gene had already recognized that you were aware of that because you can't get any data off of it, right? You can't get your read rates, you can't get your undeliverables, you can't get any of the stuff that a email marketing tool will help out on. And then you also have, you have the ability to send some notifications through Clubster, and then also Clubster is also a social media component. It is not one of the traditional kind of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram components like that, but it looks like that. It looks like from what I understood from our last call, these are kind of the platforms that you're using, combination of manual and automated, correct?
That's where we are. Clubster is sort of a private Facebook.
Correct. Yep. And I'm familiar with what that world is and what they end up doing. Yep. Now, one of the interesting things is I was talking to a club up in Michigan. Now, we are not the company that comes in and says you need to change all your systems. However, we do need to be able to get information out of the systems that you're currently using in order to be able to provide you with data. Okay, so some of those are going to probably have to be conversations for, down the road, because currently right now, the only thing that we can get information out of your databases is really just your point of sale and accounting, because we can't get anything out of WordPress. Dining reservations, we can't get anything out of a paper pencil book. You would need to kind of automate some of that stuff. Clubster, I believe we've had conversations with that, so I don't think that that's an issue. But I would need to confirm that with one of my data analysts to make sure that we have the feeds coming in. We do have feeds from, other social media networks like Twitter, but we would just have to talk to the data people over at Clubster to see if they have an API where we can pull in their feeds. Okay, and then we can't really get anything out of Outlook. So I know that this is just a discovery phase call, but I want to make sure that everybody knows that, currently the systems or lack of systems that you're using will make it hard for us to provide any type of engagement reporting out of. TAI may be the most important piece, which we can get information out of. And the cool part about it is that TAI, let's just say you love, and Gene, you're very comfortable with TAI, correct? You like their software?
Uh-huh.
Perfect. Let's just say 5 years from now, you do not like their software. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case, but let's just say that 5 years from now, you do not like their software and you move to a different accounting platform. Because MembersFirst lives in the cloud and we're actually something that sits on top, we deploy it on AWS, or we'll deploy it on kind of the Microsoft version of that. But if you ever switch your accounting platforms, or you switch, let's just say a different T-sheet, or you switch a different program, we can still take in the data from your old stuff as long as you have access to it, because we're storing that up there so that you don't have to lose any of your historical components. The club that I'm working with now in Michigan, they're actually converting from their current accounting system to a new accounting system. However, because MembersFirst sits on top, they can actually take in feeds from their old accounting system and their new one to be able to provide reporting kind of year over year. Okay. So it's a nice benefit for us to be sitting on top of everything else. Okay. Now, what I'd love to do too, the other thing that we'll jump into is we'll just jump right into kind of the platform review. So I'm going to jump into MembersFirst, and like I mentioned before, this is a platform that sits on top. We host it all. There's nothing installed at your club. So I'm just going to move over MembersFirst here. So now everybody, similar to like a Salesforce or something like that, everybody is signing into the same platform. However, your username and credentials are determining which data you actually get to see. Okay, so it's a very light client because all we're doing is feeding information into it. Okay, so I'm going to log in with my credentials. Now, granted, I'm logging in as the general manager, so I have so much more that's available to me. Whereas you may have the golf department manager or the food and beverage director, whoever it is, maybe you have them logging in and maybe their KPIs are different, or maybe their dashboards are different. So we can actually customize this based off of a user level so that people aren't seeing everything. Now, with that being said, because the username and password that I'm logging in under can see everything, there is so many dashboards in here. We would never recommend having as much as I'm going to show you today to start. Okay, but I want to make sure that I've got enough information here where we can kind of jump into some different conversations on this part of it. But by no means would I ever kind of say start off with this many on your dashboard, because too much data, it can also be a problem, right? It can also be, you can kind of get lost in the numbers. We've worked with, larger companies that literally measure 1 to 2 things for their KPIs, and that's all they focus on. So, it really depends on what you're trying to get out of the system. But what we're doing here, I'm just going to give you a quick overview as to what we're looking at, and then we'll jump into some of the dashboards. Okay, does that sound like an okay plan?
Yep.
All right, so what we're looking at here, across the top, of course, we've got, your club would be branded here. So even though we're logging into one system, you're going to put, instead of Neptune Cove, my demo site, you would have all the data from your club. Now you've got your navigation up here, and then you've got different related dashboards that can come into it. So these are kind of different areas that you would look into. You also have a quick search component over here, so you can dive directly into it, or you can actually search by a member or search by a certain data dash point, and then you can actually jump in and do that. Now, I'm also logged in as the general manager, and then I could go through and edit my information as well. Across the top here, this is the ribbon that will tell you where all the feeds are coming in, where all of your data points. So, we've taken kind of data from a variety of different clubs and a variety of different areas, but what we're looking at here is an example. Let's just say if this was Baltusrol's data, okay, across the top, you have timestamps, okay, as to when the data comes in. Some of the data we can bring through live. Some of the data we need to be able to pull in kind of once a day. So there's a variety of different ways depending on the platform that we're bringing it into. So for example, the calendar came in this morning, dining came in this morning. Let's see here, Tea Times came in this morning. Twitter actually comes in live, and so does your website traffic come in live. Okay, so there's a variety of different things that come in, and you can always see the timestamps as to the last time the data was downloaded. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Then you've got your individual dashboards. So your individual dashboards can actually be moved around, drag and drop wherever you want. Now, this is also responsive too. So, Sam, one of the things that a lot of our managers kind of really enjoy is that one, they could actually be walking into, like, how many times have you walked into the club and you're like, what were the sales yesterday, right? You want a quick snapshot as to across all different departments, what was the activity yesterday and the day before that? Or what are the meet and greet wish opportunities? Who are the people that are going to be joining here? So you could see Mary Lou's got a birthday today. John, who's a board member, actually has a reservation in the grill room. So these are kind of what we call meet, greet, wish opportunities. Or maybe you just want to know what the rounds are, right? What are the reservations for today, right? When you walked in, maybe there's no tea times today based off of the time of year, but you've got dining covers today versus yesterday. So we do look at this as kind of a first glance for the manager to be able to walk in having an idea as to what's happening at the club before you get to the door. Because if not, what would you have to do, Sam? You'd have to probably, to understand how many people are going to be on the golf course today, you'd probably have to walk over to the golf shop and figure out, hey, what's the tee sheet look like today? Then you'd have to walk to probably a different building to figure out, hey, who's made a lunch reservation today? So those are the things that we want to give you a sneak peek at before you actually walk on property. Okay. Within here, your KPIs, these are just sample ones that we've got on here. So, we take a red, yellow, green kind of approach. Green is good, red is bad, yellow's in between. But these KPIs are going to be determined by you. So our data analyst will work with you to figure out what KPIs you want to measure. So like, for example, you're looking at for guest rooms, if you're looking at your occupancy rates or your AR, so there's a variety of different things that you're going to look at. And Gene, you're probably going to look at something different than what Sam would, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing that you want to look at, some people may want to, like the membership director or maybe the board or committee, you're probably not going to look at this every single day, but you want to have this up in a committee meeting where you're looking at, hey, what's the quick breakdown of membership types? Now, the interesting part about this, most clubs, and I'm not what are the membership types that you guys have? Are you one of those clubs that has underneath golf, you have maybe, 4 different categories of golf or 4 different categories of senior? Tell me a little bit about your membership categories.
They're age-driven. Most of them are just age-driven based on residency and non-residents. Not so much related to golf. That's a separate issue.
Okay.
Golf, from the fee standpoint, golf is broken into a number of different categories, though.
But not from a membership standpoint.
Okay, and so then the nice part about that is, let's just say that you have multiple categories in each one of kind of the bucket headers. Well, what you can also do is, because you don't have to worry about changing all your categories in TAI, because what we're going to do is we can take the data in, kind of massage it so you can actually give it a clear overview. So, you could break that down into, not just golf, but it could be age brackets. Like you said, some of those are age driven. But you've got non-resident and resident, right? Maybe you've got non-resident and then age brackets. But maybe you just want to take a look at what the age brackets are. So you can actually kind of take data from the system and then map it up into something that's a little bit easier to read at the committee level, because maybe they just want to see those areas. Okay. Now,
can I
Sure.
just ask a quick question about how do we get that? So, somebody makes a tee time, actually shows up and plays golf. Gene sees it because they have rented a cart, or how do they? I'm asking the question to the group here too. Or what if they didn't rent a cart and they're a golf season member? Does she ever see it?
Yes,
Yes.
I do.
You do.
Daily.
I do.
Okay, so you.
I see it on the tee time.
Okay, so you see it on the tee times, and that translates into that member played golf. So he's got a place to pull it from, and in that member played golf, it also has age bracket or age.
I'm not positive as age bracket it would have whether you're a season or a non-season, because it would pull over season, and it wouldn't come with that information if you were not a season member.
Right.
Now, one quick question back to the group. You mentioned the tee times. From my understanding, you are not currently taking tee times. Do you have a manual tee sheet, and then the pro is putting that into TAI point of sale?
The TAI, well, how to answer you? It's a TAI tee time sheet.
Okay.
It works like 4 tees.
Okay, and so are you allowing members to make those online through the TAI tee sheet, or is it manual?
We're not.
We are not.
So
Okay.
he has a record of everyone who plays. Usually either in person or on the phone.
Okay.
A member will have a reservation for a group. Sometimes we can't fill out the group until the day they're actually playing, but we have data on who they are, and that report comes to Gene.
Perfect. So the only way that you're going to be able to get that information in here ahead of time, like say, for example, for tee times, is once it goes into their system. However, if you're not allowing them to do it online, you're just doing it as an admin only, we're not going to be able to know the information in advance. So like you may kind of have some data, you know, there could be some different ways. You need to make sure that the pros are putting that information in so we can pull it in here so we don't have to wait for the transaction, right? We don't want to wait for the tender to be able to know in advance, because then you kind of can't plan ahead. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but if you can pull from TAI, they will, I mean, a lot of reservations are made a week in advance, so.
Exactly. Perfect.
Pretty good idea on Wednesday, who's playing Friday.
So we'd have to clarify what Mike does with that reservation.
That's correct. We'd have,
Yeah, we'd have to clarify for the golf pro.
Exactly. Okay, perfect.
And then if there was something attached to each person's record in the accounting system as to age, we'd be able to pull it by age, because one of the big things we often talk about is golf rounds per age group.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? Did that happen?
we want to know whether or not there's been any benefit to providing incentives to younger people to see if it's gotten them out here.
Yep.
And arriving at those conclusions has been more of a manual, an automatic procedure.
And what we see with a lot of clubs is that a lot of people will say, hey, we need younger members, so let's just create a younger age category, create some fictitious new member category, and then let's hope they stay. And that's kind of a perfect example as to when you're jumping in there. If you went into, let's just say that this is the provisional membership category, but this could be age driven, it could be anything. You know, when we click into the provisional membership category, you know, you can see that there's always the caret of data, okay? So the caret of data will be able to kind of take you through where you live, and you can also start to change your time periods as well. So I'm not going to go through a ton of changing the time periods. We'll just kind of stick with this fictitious data here. But when we're looking at some of these data-driven components, we can start to look at, you know, the membership type transitions, right? I was working with a club in Florida where they were having challenges with their membership categories because their aging membership was all transitioning to this kind of senior level that had like cut the dues in half. So they were not preparing for it. So we can actually see, you know, from the golf members, how many actually moved to provisional. So there's a variety of different things that we can start to look at in order to help you at the board and committee level say, do we need another category? Are we investing the time? And if we are, is it working? Okay. So kind of a good point into what you were just discussing. The other thing that we like to look at from a dashboard standpoint is kind of what's happening at a glance, but also we can look at this across different data points. So for example, if we're looking at, now there's not a ton of data in this from the transactions that have come through, but let's just say Mary Lou. Mary Lou is in the membership category special. She doesn't have a tee time today, but let's just say that she did have a tee time today. She had a 7 a.m. tee time today, then a dining reservation in the afternoon, and maybe she's staying overnight in the rooms. So you can quick at a glance be able to start to get the information based off of the members that are coming in. In addition, Sam, how many times have you kind of, wanted to know some shift notes? Let's just say, Justin had a bad experience in the grill room last night, or whatever the case is. So you may have your department heads have shift notes in here if the data dashboard is actually available to them, so you can get a heads up as to what happened. So very basic, but that's one of the requests that one of our clients had that we added because they were just looking for a quick at a glance as to where do I put a shift note.
Right.
Okay. Now, a couple things that I want to jump into. I'm going to jump into one of them. I'm going to jump into the golf category for membership. So into the golf category for membership, as a couple of these will start to load up here. You could start to look at a couple different things, and it pulls in data from a very different components. So granted, this is a demo site, so everything within the map is going to show their location here, but the golf membership category here, all your golf members, if we looked over here, this is the plotting as to where they live, because in TAI, we're going to know where their addresses are. So we may pull in their primary addresses, their secondary addresses. So you can start to see where that happens. A club in New York City, actually it's in upstate uh, northern Jersey. It's in a commuter town. So most of the people work in Manhattan. What they're actually seeing with their membership, club has just done a huge giant renovation, which is great. However, what they're noticing is that a lot of their members, it's a commuter town. Most of them work on Wall Street. A lot of the, let's just say, kind of baby boomers that are still living up there, they're actually moving into the city because they don't need the big house in the suburbs anymore. So they're actually seeing a shift of those categories. Their primary residences, they're starting to all move into the city. So that's going to mean a couple different things. How often are you going to head out of the city to go dine? Or if you're heading out of the city to golf, are you going to head back in the city to have dinner? So they're looking at kind of plotting where those pieces are coming from. But now we're looking at the golf category level. You're looking at your average spending per month, average spending per time, based off of sales category. And you could start to drill into each one of those if you really need to be able to kind of see where these, where they're spending their information. So you can drill into the category level based off of that data as well. Now, the other thing, I'm going to jump over into kind of some of the related dashboards just to kind of, be time conscious here. A couple of the things that we like to look at, let's just look at like lessons in spa. So lessons in spa, granted, a couple different plot points on this part of it. You can actually look at reservations. So reservations are going to be, these are just kind of heat maps as to when the most popular points are. If we click into, let's just say 2017, you could start to look in and drill into where most the staff reservations are driven. But I think the most interesting piece on this part of it is that when you're looking at something like this, like if they're doing club fitting, let's just say it's for lessons or whatever it is, if you're seeing more and more people are actually using the services using TrackMan, well, you know what? Maybe it starts to say, hey, do we need more people who are comfortable and certified in using that software? Or are you building, golf simulators that can actually use this to benefit your membership? So you could start to kind of take a look at the items on, within what you're doing from a membership standpoint, so that you're not just buying another piece of $5,000 worth of, TrackMan software just because the pros want it, right? There's got to be a need for that piece of it. Or is there a need to hire a teaching only instructor, that's only doing that, all week long? So do you buy the software or invest in the employee? A couple different ways to take a peek at that.
And tell me about the staff reservation square there. Tell me what that's about. I get all the other graphs. Is that just lessons and when there's a good time pot?
Exactly. So I mean the blocks are going to be kind of where basically the most, and you can actually look at a lot of this data too. You can actually look at it all into just the data view as well, so that if you need to export it out, you can kind of start to make your own reporting. But what this is actually kind of looking at from kind of almost like a heat map component, if I click into 2017 and then I click into lessons, you could start to see kind of, individual training is kind of the biggest block, right? So it's actually just saying kind of the types of lessons that they're having. Are they spending at the range? Is it more video than individual? And a lot of that is going to come into how you're categorizing these pieces. So you want to make sure that, garbage in, garbage out. If you're just having the pros type in lesson, well, you may want to start to think about, is this a video lesson? Is this a range lesson? Is this a playing lesson? Because then you can kind of accommodate a little bit more. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
I have a question. It's Justin. Is there any way to overlay weather information that is downloaded or that is gathered automatically from outside sources?
Yep. Yeah. So I just jumped over into a different component where this is, I went into one of the utilization areas. And the utilization one is where we're pulling in a lot of live components. So this is pulling in over your, the weather for those areas. And this is only looking at the weather today, but there's probably a variety of different ways that we can pull in the weather to overlay it on top of other reports. But as long as one of the things that we've thought about, We have not made it that far yet, but a lot of clubs are using, and Sam, maybe you've heard, have you heard of like WeatherBug and a few of the other kind of like lightning detection components, kind of the weather tracking software?
Look at them all day, every day in the summertime.
Do you use anybody at your club?
We have a store. We have an alarm system, obviously, but I think the pro shop is using. Trying to remember. I think it's WeatherBug. I think
Okay.
that's what they rely on.
So one of the things that we would want to look at with our data analyst is to see, hey, you know what, we may be able to contact WeatherBug and try to pull in that data because you could get that information at your fingertips. Now, we haven't done that before, but it's not to say that, you know, we wouldn't, you know, be willing to work with them to pull in the data that you're already receiving, right? So to answer your question, yes, we can pull in some different weather. On this
it'll preserve it, right? It'll preserve it, not in real time, but it'll go back and tell us that last August we had, you know, to show us the ebbs and flows of usage with weather and times of year. Is that, you know?
Yeah, I don't currently have that set up into this right now, but I think that that's probably just something I would confirm with how we can overlay that on top of some of these other reports, because we're getting in the information anyways. It's just how do we create that dashboard that actually pulls all of those pieces together.
Okay.
Because we're just taking a data feed, so we're gonna know kind of where that's coming from, and it just has to go back historically to figure out on the, you know, the 17th of July, it snowed, you know, that type of stuff.
Why would we have no golf revenue on a Saturday in June?
Yep, exactly.
Right.
Right.
A couple other things, and this was actually kind of funny. When we were over at Baltusrol, and they don't do a ton on social media. However, they're mentioned a ton, right? They are one of the most talked about clubs within that world. But, you know, this is just a fake kind of data feed on here. It's taken in a feed from Twitter. But literally, we were actually in their boardroom going through it, and we were actually seeing the live feed. Somebody was actually on the golf course. They tweeted something, which connected them to their Instagram account, literally saying something awesome about the club. And it was funny because we clicked on it and we kind of identified that person's got to be on the golf course right now. So even if the club is not participating in social, you can still get a sneak peek at what people are saying about you. And we can also use, we are using some language programming to kind of determine sentiment scores. And then we can actually put in a bunch of search terms that we know not only when, you know, your club is mentioned, or, you know, if we're mentioning other different keywords that you think could be popping up in social media feeds, we can pull that information in. On top of that, the other things that we're looking at here is pulling in information from the website. Justin, you and John, maybe in a committee meeting, even though Sam and Gene and your web developer have access to your Google Analytics, 9 times out of 10, you and John probably aren't going to go log into Google Analytics. You could, right? I mean, anybody could do that. But, you know, what we want to do is we can pull in dashboards from Google Analytics so that if you get that question in a committee meeting, you can actually just go over to that dashboard, pull up, you know, what are the website visits in the last 7 days, you know, if you want to kind of look at some of the data pieces across that. Okay. Or, you know, where are people coming from? How, or, you know, are they coming organic or not? Where are they coming from? You know, so there's a variety of different things that you can do. We don't want to pull in everything from Google Analytics, but we want to be able to pull in the information that kind of is relevant to you. Okay. Now,
So I've got a related question before I forget. So, you know, if you just type in any country club, right, into Google, a bunch of these websites will come up and they all have like golf course reviews, and there's tons of them. And if I click on any particular one at any particular one time, they may have information about Green Spring or any other club. What I notice is 90% of the time the information about Green Spring is wrong. Either they have like the course slope and ratings wrong, the yardage is 500 yards off, something.
The wrong pro's name.
The wrong pro's name. It's any number of things. The course designer's name's wrong. So what's the most efficient way to make sure that's right? Because sometimes it looks good, sometimes it looks
yeah, I mean, it kind of goes to no matter how private or exclusive you are, you want to own your brand, right? You want to be able to control the message, or at least know when other people are messaging about it. Yes, there's probably going to be like golf review components. There's going to be like you do need somebody that's able to kind of make sure that you're managing your online brand, right? And we did that with Baltusrol, where they had somebody actually claimed their Facebook page that wasn't them. So literally, we helped them. We went through. We did all the pain in the butt components where we literally had to contact Facebook, prove who we were, claim it back to them, and then we kind of rebranded a lot of their pages. We do that quite often for clubs because some clubs don't want to go through the pain points of, doing that or searching for that components. We're okay doing the kind of the nitty gritty that maybe the club isn't comfortable with. I always tell people when we're looking at, whenever the topic of social media comes up, yes, I know you're using Clubster as a private social network, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be aware of everything else that's happening out there. If I look at Instagram and, here's my disclaimer, I'm actually, this is my personal Instagram account, just in case any of my friends post anything weird. But, if we just typed in, Green Spring Valley Hunt Club. So now granted, you got 44 posts coming up with a hashtag Green Spring Valley Hunt Club. Now, I have no idea if I'm assuming that's your logo, so I'm assuming that this is your club. You have a whole story that's out there that you may or may not even be aware of. And to be honest with you, it's pretty cool. Like just at this first glance, you got a lot of interesting pieces that are out there. But
You look good.
what our goal is, I've seen the worst of the worst, right? I've seen disgruntled employees take this stuff over. I've seen all that stuff. Our goal from a data standpoint is to be able to give you at least a sneak peek so that you don't have to so that you can be prepared. You don't have to participate, but you want to, it's cool that you can know what people are saying about you.
Sure.
Okay. A couple other dashboards that I just want to touch into, and certainly we can dive deeper down the road, but there's a couple different things that I wanted to look at. One is a campaign component. This is where you would typically create dashboards that you're actually going to measure and send out campaigns, right? So these are going to be kind of your members at risk, or you're trying to drum up business. So for example, you may create a dashboard that says, the measurement tools is that they've had no dining reservations, they've had no guest room reservations or tea times in the last 6 months. Okay. If that's the case, you may drill down into these people, send them a quick email campaign. However, you can't send that through Outlook, right? You would either need to send it through, the MembersFirst email marketing platform. We can work with Constant Contact or MailChimp, but you want to be able to send those campaigns directly out to the people that you've targeted. Or let's just say, you're trying to boost lesson revenue, or you're trying to get more people involved in the game, right? If you've got no lessons in the last 6 months, here's a quick campaign for you. Okay. Or let's look at cross department. These are those cross department things we were talking about before. Whereas, you can see that whoever this is, Mr. Brian, he's played golf 311 days out of the year, but he's only dined 85 times on those 311 times. So you've got a big opportunity there to make sure that he's spending more money, right?
Right.
You can start to look at, you could probably, if you're data-driven people, you could start to kind of think of your own types of campaigns. I'm not saying that these are going to necessarily be perfect for you. These are going to be just to start the conversation, because you may want to look at, okay, who's had 50% or more drop in spending from the previous year? But you may want to look at the total spending, but don't include, you want to look at your, maybe you want to remove your discretional spending, so that you're not looking at, hey, did this person join? Or, you don't want to have your initiation fee kind of lumped into that. So then we would need to look at how is your structure set up in TAI to make sure that your initiation fees and your operational spending is different. Okay. But you can start to look at, hey, who's had a huge drop in spending? If people aren't spending money, then they're eventually going to be at risk. Gone are the day. A lot of people used to say the member who never comes to the club is the perfect member. Now, I know that there's members in the room, right? So I'm not trying to offend anybody. But people used to say that, the members who aren't there, they're still paying their bills and they're still coming in. But you know what? You're the first thing they'll drop if it comes to that point, right? So it is important for us to be able to make sure that you're getting a clear picture at that. And then what you can do is start to create what is your risk profile, right? And what is your risk profile? You may even start to, like if you've got photos, from your member directory, you could start to look at your risk profiles and then create campaigns off of that. So you have a known risk profile at the club, right? You know what this is. You've looked at the data. These are the people who normally leave the club, right? There are indicators along the way. It's just finding out what those indicators are. Once you know that, you measure it, and Sam, it's going to be up to you and the management team most likely to be able to make sure that these members stay engaged so that they don't leave the club, right? But it's not just spending at the member level. I'm going to jump into, I don't know, I'll just jump into a random member here.
What is that guy with the mustache?
So I'm going to look at whoever this is, Jim Lowell. Okay. It's pulling in information from them. You can also look at who his dependent is. So Jennifer looks like she's got an account tied to him. But if we're looking at the individual member profile, we're looking at maybe his purchases. What is he spending his money on? What is the category that he's spending his money on? If you look at here, the big bulk of this is golf membership dues, right? So let's break down into maybe this, food and beverage sales. If we're clicking in food and beverage sales, you'll notice how some of these other ones have started to change. So like the data starts driving based off of what I've clicked on. Okay. But I'm going to refresh real quick.
23. All right.
I'm going to refresh real quick just to take off some of the filters. The one thing I want to show you down here is this right here is kind of coming to play quite a bit because, and this was kind of, and Sam, I don't know if you remember this, but Kevin was giving us the story where he would be normally considered an at-risk member at one of the clubs he belongs to because he's never there, right? He's never there. I think one of his examples was he golfed like twice last year. However, he's had a lot of things going on, right? So he hasn't been able to get to the club. But if we're looking at here, and if we're comparing the family unit to the member, Kevin would normally be an at-risk member because he has not spent anything at the club. However, his family unit may have been. So what we're doing is the ideal member. So Kevin's not really at risk, right? Because his family's enjoying it. There's no way Kevin's going to leave if his family's, enjoying the club, right? And we all know that. But what we want to do is we want to help out and measure kind of the tree trunk here. We want everything full. Blue is going to be, an overlap of the family unit. However, if you see that these colors are really teeny tiny and small, it means that they're not spending anything. They don't have any recent visits. They haven't had any rounds. That's an at-risk member. Whereas this person, the club may not be using, the family member may not be using it as often, or the member's not using it, but the family is. So I'm not really going to consider this person an at-risk member because their family's using it a ton. What I am going to do is, as a manager, I'm probably going to start making sure that, that family is going to whatever it is, brunch with Santa, or they're in the tennis camp. I'm going to start kind of having my promotions a little bit more towards that. And I may reach out to the member who's not using the club, and I may say, hey, we notice you haven't been here in a long time, but we notice that your family's really enjoying the club. Maybe you want to kind of reach out to them and figure out, what is happening. Maybe there's a job change. There's a couple different things on there. So you can kind of get a sneak peek at the information that you're looking at. Okay. Now, granted, we could probably talk. We're right at 4:00. We could probably look at a ton of different examples. My goal for today was really just to kind of give you a sneak peek at the software, tell you a little bit about how and why we developed it. And you know what, if this is something that you think that could help provide some transparency at the board and committee level, Sam, this may be able to help you kind of look at the days in a glance, to provide the reporting that's being asked of you, and maybe help you kind of with some, member retention. Then, we'd be all for kind of, working through those next steps. But that's the items that I wanted to cover today. I'm certainly more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
This is Justin. I have a couple questions. Tell me about the size of some of your customers. What's the smallest club that has engaged your services and signed up and had a really positive experience in utilizing the data you can deliver to?
The smallest club? Trying to think as far as size.
Like membership size, right? I mean, Baltusrol is a massive club, right? And we are a very boutique, small, exclusive but smaller club.
Yep, I would probably
have different touch points.
Yeah, so the way that I would look at it, not necessarily the size and the stature of the club, I would look at probably departments. So, if we looked at Baltusrol, the way that I'm looking at Baltusrol would be departments. So whether you had 200 members or 10,000 members, it is, they've got for them, they've got, overnight rooms. So they've got rooms like a hotel department, right, that you probably don't have, but they've got hotel, membership, dining, food. So food and beverage, I would put into dining on those areas, and then you've got your membership categories. It's not the amount of people that live within that. How many? Well, let's ask this question. So, how many memberships do you have, and then how many people are at your club?
I think we are 600 and change member billing units.
Correct.
So that'll give you an idea of the number of active accounts. What's it, roughly 3 times that amount once you factor in children and dependents and spouses and all that? Is that a reasonable?
1,500 users.
1,500 users, 600 billing accounts.
Yeah. So you're actually about the size of, you're probably just a touch smaller than Baltusrol, from what I know on that part of it. So it's hard, like as far as like the small clubs that are on this, I mean, we've only got a handful of clubs that are using this, because we've hand selected the people who are using it. The reason that your club is attractive to us is because we've taken in feeds from TAI before, but we want to get better at doing that. So, that's why your club is attractive to us, because you kind of you fit a niche that we need, which will benefit you kind of on the pricing piece of it. But I would look at it.
You're going to pay us? You're going to pay us the first year?
No, we're definitely not going to pay you. But you have data feeds that we haven't done before, right? You have Clubster, which we have not done before. So those are the things that are attractive to us. The people that are using things that we have not experienced before, those are the ideal ones for us. Like TAI, we're not worried about, but we're running into that a little bit more and more, that people are using TAI and they're having a tough time getting reporting out of it. So that's why you're attractive to us. You're like I honestly don't like that. Most of the clubs that are using this have, anywhere from, a minimum of like 5 departments that are using it. Some of them are larger clubs, but the reason that some of them are larger clubs is because they have the people who are looking for that type of data,
Right. Yeah, I mean, small companies don't need HR departments. Large companies need HR departments to keep everything organized and to give the upper management the reports and information they need. And we're kind of more on the smaller company side if you're going to correlate that to country clubs. I was just curious. I'm not playing devil's advocate. I was just curious. My other question is, how do we take some of the information, if you have push communication that can come through emails, you have potentially web-centric communication where your your members visit your website or access Clubster to gain information. How, if information is gathered and the analytics can be worked on through your program, does that become dripped out and put out there for an expanded audience to see without giving them access to all the guts of the system, so to speak?
Well, so it depends on. I mean, one of the comments that was made before that this would be. I mean, this would be a board, committee, and management tool. Like, I would not display this stuff to the membership, because it's user based. Like the dashboards that are provided out here are going to be based off of the user that's logging in as. The way that we get that data is. MembersFirst for the last 20 years, which is the company that I work for, we have had to integrate with multiple, like we integrate with over 20 plus companies for a variety of different things in the private club space. So we always had to get really good at kind of taking in data to display it to other people within our websites, right? So we know how to, we can gather the data. We've integrated with TAI for years. I've got probably a handful, probably less than 15 clients within my database that use TAI, but I've always had to get the information out of that to display it onto our websites, right? So we've been able to work with those companies to benefit MembersFirst to be able to take that information in a good communications platform. And so we've kind of just transferred that data component over into MetricsFirst. Not the data, but basically the same concept of how we're extracting it. Okay.
So it is free the first year?
I'm sorry? It's
So it is free the first year. If you're not going to pay us, it's free the first year, so you can work out the kinks. Is that what you're offering here?
Exactly. No, we are recording this, right, and we are sending this over to you. So I do enjoy my job, and I would like to provide for my family. But no, all joking aside, no, the things that we would look at. So some of the, I mean, and to be honest with you, I mean, this platform, like we want to deliver this platform to, I mean, we have our bread and butter for kind of our point of sale, accounting, our our web services, our communications, our reservations, and those pieces of the puzzle. We wanted to be able to provide kind of this platform to clubs because it's new. I mean, literally, like the setup and configuration is under $5,000. And it depends on how many data points we're pulling in, but you guys have a couple attractive ones that we want. So that we've got flexibility on, and literally, depending on the information that comes in, the annual subscription fees could be anywhere between $4,500 a year to $6,000 a year. So it's not like you're, in most other industries, when you're looking for a data warehouse on this part of it, you're not necessarily paying those prices because we know that this is something that's new to the industry and we want people to use it.
If we need to access some other data gathering, whether it be a 4Ts, if we need to get ourselves set up in some of these other departments
before they can help us,
can using MetricsFirst access to TAI or whatever our point of sale system, can you as the hub of the wheel help get these other programs live quicker? Just as you mentioned, if you were to convert from a different ledger system to another down the road, you've been able to kind of upload to us, and then we kind of be your detachable hard drive and your flash drive. Is there any way you can?
Yeah. So yes and no.
This is a recorded line, by the way, so you better get this right because we're holding you to it.
Well, so yes, we can expedite that, but like the quickest way that we're going to be able to expedite it is by using MembersFirst software. Like for example. Like I know you mentioned 4Ts. Yes, you're going to have to go.
So you have the equivalent of a 4Ts. You have all of that already.
Correct. Yeah. So like for example, you're building your website on WordPress. I honestly I can't get anything out of WordPress. So like the first thing that you're going to have to look at is because right now all I can get information in from your specific club is going to be from TAI. Which, to be honest with you, if that was it, I don't think that this is going to be a great fit for you right now. It could be down the road, but looking at a web platform, because we control a lot of those pieces of the puzzle, a web platform through us is going to be your first initial. Now, then from there, you may look at a T sheet. Now, you may look at members first T times, you may look at TAI T times, and you may look at 4Ts. I'm not saying that you need to buy ours, but ideally you'd want to probably look at kind of the options where you could actually get where we've taken data before. So yes, we could expedite it. We can expedite it faster.
I didn't realize that you had the modules to replace that, or to bring it all, bring that kind of in-house, right? Or introduce those modules to us. Because at the end of the day, we're busy taking care of membership. Our staff is taking care of its membership with sort of that personal touch. We love the idea of accessing data and having it at our disposal as a way to help in our evolution and help us be thoughtful and make the most targeted changes. But if it means that we have to take two giant steps backwards and redeploy human capital internally to try and start to build the database so that this data could come to life down the road, we're going to be pushing that rock uphill, and it's going to be it's not going to be a positive experience for most.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lack of capacity. I think that's fair to say. Well, but we understand. I think 4T's type T sheet is a logical next step. Gives then something visibility to the dining room. And if there's a way to tie it all together through you, we'll listen. But at the end of the day, we're looking for a place to introduce these and go live without setting us way back, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Right, Sam?
Yes.
And the way that I would envision doing that, because you're again, like, you got to look at the department heads that are using it as well, or the reservations components that are using it. So I'm not saying, like, so Neptune Cove is the MembersFirst demo site. Okay. From a T-sheet standpoint, I mean, I'm not saying that you need to have the members go online and make T times through our T-sheet. But from an administrative standpoint, you probably need to be putting that information in there. But you're already putting that information in to TAI. So that's an information that you probably don't have to switch right away. You could just use the member-facing component of TAI to start, right? And then evaluate where you go from there. But from a standpoint of the biggest thing that, I would want to make sure that you're not, for dining and reservations, that's because you're looking for those cross-department components. If I wanted to make a dining reservation, you may not have the member make the reservation online. However, what we would at least at a minimum want you to do is, when somebody calls, rather than write it in the book, we want you to, make a reservation. Just instead of writing it down, type it. So you're going to type it into kind of the reservations area back here, whether it's for an event or anything else. So those are the things that you're going to want to be able to have at least your team be comfortable with. But then you have a little bit of an evaluation process probably ahead of you prior to even jumping into some of these pieces.
That part doesn't worry me. I think we're pretty good about recording even walk-ins on the daily dining reservation sheet. So we've got the data there, but it is not being entered anywhere in a type fashion. But I think that's a discipline that we could employ to get us there.
Okay.
So I do see it as a phased approach, if that kind of makes sense on your end.
I think for sure. I guess, forgive my ignorance, but when you say members first web platform, if you were to design a web page for us, what sort of a cost above and beyond the less than 5 we've already talked about would that be?
Free too. That's free also.
This is a recorded line, so everything's free. It honestly ranges because, like, if you look at I don't know, like, and I'm just using some traditional clubs, but like if you look at the country club in Brookline, doesn't take long. Like, this is their homepage. Like
Yeah.
this does not take me long to do. But if I
Right.
looked at something like Baltusrol, kind of sticking in that traditional world, Baltusrol
Mm-hmm.
tells a bigger story as to what they're doing. They even go through and talk a lot about their championship tradition and their interactivity. And then you jump
Mm-hmm.
into, the Medinas of the world who are big marketing giants. Even though they're exclusive and private, they're actually doing a ton of different work as to how they're displaying their information online. So from a website design standpoint, I mean, I like this year alone, I've designed projects that are like 5 to 7 grand, but I've also designed projects that have been 30 to 40 grand. Um, so it really depends as to what you're trying to get out of your communications plan.
Well, I guess the point is that if we do elect to go forward and implement this idea, I want to talk to you offline about what those costs might be, and have you take a look at what we've got now, and let us know how complicated it would be and how expensive it would be.
Yep.
To try and make it all work together, to make it so that what data that you're getting, that you have access to the data that you want.
Exactly, because if we don't have access to the data that we need, then
Dang, I gotta go. Continue this conversation. Thank you, Sean.
perfect. Thanks.
I see it.
So Sam, to answer your question on that part of it, you're right. Like even if it's only a couple grand to get you going on MembersFirst, I'd rather have you save the couple grand if we can't get the data out of it. Like if we can only get information in from TAI, it's going to be really hard for you to find the value in this before you're doing any of the other pieces.
Okay.
Yeah, so what might be helpful, if I'm thinking about this in a bigger picture sense, is when we talk about steps forward, is to go down kind of two parallel paths. One is, hey, we're interested in collecting more data and making better decisions. The software, as a software novice who has unfortunately invested in some software as a service companies, some have been good, some have been bad, but I understand it enough to be dangerous. This looks interesting to me, but the bigger picture for us as, I think as a board would be to look at overall IT budget going forward and to make good decisions where we don't budget for new web page design this year from our local provider and a different reservation system 2 years from now for our restaurant when we change the kitchen, and come up with a long-term plan. So you might want to say, hey, on the one path, let's continue talking about how we might implement what you presented today. I've got a couple more specific questions that we can talk about later, probably having to do with reporting and ease of customized reports, which I'm sure your system does very nicely. And then a bigger picture where we would probably like to know more about your products. And if you said to us, hey, if we've got 500 member country club X, here's how I would design their IT system, and here's how I'd put the pieces together. If personalities and preferences to how, particular software and familiarity wasn't an issue, here's how I'd start if I was working from scratch.
Yeah.
So as we go forward, we have, kind of the latest and greatest, and we don't duplicate efforts and step on our own feet.
Got it.
Yeah, and the approach, like that approach, is usually the most ideal approach, especially coming from where your current systems are. And it's kind of like too many clubs do not plan out. They do long-term strategic planning, but usually that's around facilities and the golf course and other amenities at the club. Too many times people are not putting that same type of long-term planning into not only their tech, but their communications plan as well, because the people who have fought against, say, social media for so long, now they're realizing that, oh, everybody's there, so they're trying to play catch up. So it doesn't, there's a way to be able to put those plans in place so that when you get asked from the committee that says, hey, why aren't we doing this? Most of the time you pull out that strategic plan, you say, we have that on our plan, but we're just not there yet, and this is when we're hoping to address it. And so we can look at this as those two same parallel paths in order to get to that first one, which is that the metrics first and making decisions based off of data. We have a plan to be able to put these other things in place, because the platform with no data doesn't really help.
Well, I can say for myself as a member, we also we've added some things that are really nice. Clubster's a really nice thing, but we shouldn't have to go to Clubster for some stuff, the website for some other stuff, and get information via, a blast email and Outlook for other things, right? And because it's confusing as to, well, where do I find that information?
Yep.
And we don't, it's like Justin said, we're a small company in the big scheme of things, and we haven't integrated those things well yet.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. We're a small company with multi-generations of users, and all of whom want everything in a tailored fashion.
That's right.
They want to be. Some don't want to look anywhere. Some want us to call them on the phone and say, "We're having pizza night."
That's
so right. It's hard to know exactly what the best way is to get to everybody, or to know how to lead them so that they should all go to one spot.
Mm-hmm.
And again, because they're members, they're going to do what they want to do anyway.
Yep.
I say that respectfully, but it's a fact. It's just the way it is. So when Justin was asking about whether or not this be, data that we're providing to the membership, I think it's probably a source for data that we can interpret and then share as we choose to through something like a president's annual letter. I don't think we want members involved in what we're looking at here today on a regular or even semi-regular basis. What we want is for it to be able to help guide us to be more efficient and create more revenue, I think.
Yeah, and it can be a programming tool, to understand that, like, hey, you know what, maybe the Father's Day golf tournament, over the last couple of years, take a look at, the numbers that have either dropped or improved. Like, do you add an extra day? There's so many different ways to look at it, but then at least you have, and hopefully the data confirms the decisions that you're making too. I mean, that's the ideal situation.
If it validates where your thinking is as a board or as a manager.
Exactly, and it helps you it helps you not focus on the things that don't matter, because too often those are the conversations that can happen at clubs, and then you just get lost in the weeds, so that you're never kind of moving the cart forward.
We've been there.
And it comes a little bit from personal experience. I mean, I've been with MembersFirst for the past I'm going into my 7th year now. But prior to that, I spent about 8 years as a club manager at a Boston-based golf management company. Most of us at our company come from the operational standpoint, where we live this, and so we know the challenges that your clubs are facing. And then now you throw the data-driven committee members that are now moving into those roles at clubs, and we're trying to help clubs catch up. To be honest with you, and it's been going great, but it is something that is slow moving. But you kind of have to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think anybody, whatever department it is, whether it's golf, tennis, dining, or whatever, whoever's managing that specific has that responsibility. If they can daily, weekly, and monthly look at the same 5 things that they deem most important, and know, if I'm hitting my number on this today, I'm going to hit it for the week and in the month, and I'm going to make my budget, and that feeds up to Sam, who can look at all of it instead of all 5 things for that department. He's just looking at one thing a day for each department, and it all ties together. And
a good exercise based off of that, what I have seen in the past, is that take your committee chair, and I'll just use rackets as an example. Like, I'm assuming you probably have a rackets committee, correct?
Yeah.
So you've got a rackets committee chair, right? And then you've also got the head of the rackets program, whether it's the director of tennis, director of rackets, whatever this is. you pair them two up together and you say, hey, what are the 5 things that you want to be able to report on in order to make sure that you're effectively operating your business, or what are the key indicators that you're trying to look for? And then you kind of collectively pair those 2 people up, and then you have whatever it is, maybe 5 different departments. Then you bring those people together, because it has to be a combination of staff involvement and the committee structure, because you're looking at it from 2 different angles, but you're all doing it to help out the overall club. And all clubs are small businesses. Most of them are, anywhere from, 3 to 7 million. I mean, yes, you have those giant clubs that are out there that, produce, I think the biggest club in the country, produces 50 million a year. Most clubs are under 10, and that's considered a small business. So we want to make sure that, because you're a small business, we want to make sure that you can run effectively, and stuff like this helps sometimes.
Just a curiosity question. You were going through a couple of screens, and this just hit me. And before I forget it, I'll ask: can you track not only number of meals, but what type of meals, and then where they were, what room they were in, or even what table the people were sitting? Do you get down into that minute detail?
You cannot, like the table piece of it. No. Let's see if we went into the dining dashboards. Let's see.
I'm not sure that Restaurant Manager wouldn't give me that now.
I see.
Which is our dining software. It's and TAI possibly.
Yep. So let's just say that this information came in from TAI. You're maybe gonna say, I don't know. Let's look at this person, this member. I mean, you could look at the member level and then jump into. Let's look at the category for. Just trying to find some food and beverage pieces. So food and beverage sales. So for this specific member, and you can do it at the membership category level as well. So like if you want to look at all non-resident members, where are they spending their money? So in the food and beverage component, and here are all the items that they're spending it on. So this is a specific member, but you could look at it as the membership level. But then what you could also do too is you could take it. You could also look at kind of the point of sale. So like you're going to have point of sale terminals in probably restaurant, in golf. So then you can break it down into, okay, well, which point of sale terminal are they using the most? Is it the halfway house? So you can kind of see where their spending is there. So yes, you can get to that information. It just depends on how you currently have your setup over here, because your food and beverage spending by point of sale, you may have stuff like this. Like this is the terrace point of sale. This is the solarium point of sale. And so how many, does it make sense to put a terminal on the patio? Maybe it does, because you keep on rolling out a point of sale terminal. Well, it may be time to invest in having it hardwired so that it saves a half hour of setup.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm thinking of it as more of a, hey, look, if nobody has sat in that room at that table in 6 months to eat a meal because it just isn't used, let's figure out a way to get people in there to use it, right?
Totally.
Because we've got asset, and I think that's an issue here. Mainly, we did a beautiful redo of the club, but the flow's not exactly right, and people tend to eat in the same. Everybody eats in the same spot, so but we might find different uses for the extra space we got that are beautiful rooms. Mm-hmm. But before we do that, I would be the one in the boardroom raising my hand and say, well, you can't kick out the guys that play cards there on Tuesday, right? So we'd like to know, when's that room being used? How often is it being used? How many meals are served there? What revenue is it generating? And if it's not generating much, we could do something totally different with that room, possibly.
Right.
So down here a little bit lower, you've got your based off of your rooms, right? So you need to make sure that your point of sale systems are set up.
Yeah.
So you've got your reservations by your facilities, right? So let's just say that you have a private dining room that could fit 18 people in it, or whatever the case is. You're going to want to set these up as different categories, so then you can start tracking those by reservations. But again, it means that when somebody calls in, they need to be putting those into a system so that we can track it.
Into a date and location.
Yep. So
and number.
And that's the information that because using this as an engagement tool you spent the money to build the room or whatever it is. Now it's not just nobody ever uses it. Get people to use it, right? There's a way about it. There was a need at one point. Maybe you need to repurpose it. The thing that I think of, there's a restaurant up north of Boston called The Point, and they actually have a private room that only fits, I think, 14 seats. And so what they did is they actually created a club within a public restaurant. They created its own Instagram feed. They created all these different pieces. And so what they actually did is they've got, I think it's called 14 seats. So, they named it, I think, based off of the seats that are in the room. And it kind of tells people that you got to sign up or become a member of this in order to get a reservation in that area. So you can get just as creative as you want.
Awesome.
So rather than just say nobody's ever going to dine in that room, you kind of this is a public restaurant that created a membership. It has this exclusivity feel, and they give people a heads up as to what they're missing, right?
Smart. Looks like a nice room too.
So,
but that might be this kind of thing. Like we'll argue for the next 50 years about allowing blue jeans in the club,
right.
But we might designate a room and test it and say, well, here's the data. We had 2 meals eaten in there the last 2 weeks, and the 2 weeks that we allowed blue jeans, there were 20 meals at night, right? Then the people that were anti-blue jean might say, well,
it's economics.
Mm-hmm.
Or we might find out different. Who knows?
It allows you to test it, right? Because you may be wrong, right? Or you may be right. And I
be able to.
Yeah, you could say it worked. You could say it worked, or it didn't, and then you maybe need to revamp it. So, just looking at the clock down here, I know that this was great. You were the last call that I had today, but I do need to get organized before I head out of here. Is that from a next step standpoint? Certainly on this end, love to have you kind of review internally. One, we probably only hit the iceberg. After you have a chance to digest it, let's try to find out another call, and then maybe what I could do is I could bring in, like, if you've got some example type of reports or engagement tools or KPIs, like if you've got the KPIs that you want to measure or just the start of those, then I could bring in my data analyst and say, hey, how can we start to get this system in here? But I think we need to identify what those 2 parallel paths are for the project. One is the metrics first, collecting more data to make better decisions. But then it's also kind of the, are you spending the right money in the right technology spots to even get the data for the other path? So.
Okay, we'll do our homework.
Okay.
And we'll put our heads together between now and when I call you next. And it's December, so there's a good possibility when I call you next is going to be January. But we will. Our board will meet on the 21st, I think. Our executive committee will meet the week before. We 3 or 4 on our end. We'll talk probably before then, but I don't know that we'll get right back to you if that's okay.
No problem. I'm traveling. I leave tomorrow and I don't get back until next Thursday. So no rush on this end. Sam, why don't you give me a heads up after the meeting on the 21st, and then maybe we come up with a little bit of a game plan to retouch base in early January. I mean, this isn't something that happens overnight, but let's just keep the train rolling.
We'll stay focused. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Thanks a lot, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.